The cold bit deep into Jake Morrison's bones as consciousness returned to him. His eyes opened slowly, fighting against the frost that had gathered on his eyelashes. The pod around him hissed and groaned. Ancient machinery working to bring him back to life after what should have been a 200-year sleep. Something felt wrong. The air tasted stale, older than it should be. Jake's training kicked in before his mind fully cleared. He was a commander in the Earth colonial fleet, leading the Horizon's Edge on humanity's greatest journey into the stars. They were supposed to reach the Andromeda sector, establish a new colony, and wake up to a fresh start. But the numbers on the display above his head made no sense. The date couldn't be right. He pushed the pod door open with weak arms. His muscles screamed in protest, atrophied from the long sleep. Around him, other pods were opening too. Men and women stumbled out, confused and disoriented. Some were crying. Others just stood there, staring at nothing. "Commander Morrison, sir." A woman's voice cut through the chaos. It was Lisa Grant, the chief scientist. Her dark hair was matted with frost, and her face looked pale and drawn. "We have a serious problem." Jake steadied himself against the pod. "Report, Doctor. The ship's clock says we've been asleep for over 10,000 years, not 200. 10,000. Her voice cracked on the last words. The command deck was a mess of flashing warning lights and confused crew members. Emma Davis sat at the communications station, her fingers flying over controls that hadn't been touched in millennia. She was young for her position, barely 25 when they went into the pods, but she was the best linguist humanity had ever produced. "I'm picking up thousands of signals," Emma said, not looking up from her screen. "But none of them are human. Not a single one." Admiral Kyle Brooks entered the command deck, his heavy footsteps echoing in the metal chamber. He was a mountain of a man, built for war in an age when humanity still knew what war meant. His face was grim as he took in the situation. "Someone tell me what happened to our species," he said quietly. Lisa pulled up a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed the galaxy, but not as they remembered it. New borders divided the stars. Alien symbols marked hundreds of territories. Where human colonies should have been, there was nothing. "I've analyzed the electromagnetic spectrum for the last 6 hours," Lisa explained. "There are at least 300 distinct alien civilizations out there. They have a unified government called the Galactic Council. They trade, they communicate, they have laws." She paused, her hands shaking. "And they don't mention us at all." Jake felt his stomach turn. "What about Earth? What about home?" Emma spoke up from her station. "I can't find it, sir. The coordinates don't match anything in the current star charts. It's like someone erased it from the maps." Number 1. Created. The crew was gathering now, hundreds of them crowding into the observation decks and corridors. They all wanted answers. They all wanted to know what happened to the world they left behind. Jake could see the fear in their eyes, the confusion, the anger. "We need to stay calm," Admiral Brooks said, his voice carrying authority even in this impossible situation. "We're alive. The ship is functional. That's more than we had any right to expect after 10,000 years." Over the next few days, the crew worked to repair and update the Horizon's Edge. The ship was old, ancient by the standards of the civilizations around them, but it was still operational. More importantly, it was armed. Human military vessels were built to last, designed for conflicts that the old Earth government knew were coming. Jake spent hours in his quarters, reviewing the data Lisa's team had collected. The aliens out there were advanced, maybe more advanced than humanity had been when they left Earth. But they were soft too. Their communications spoke of peace, of trade agreements, of cultural exchanges. They hadn't fought a real war in over 2,000 years. "Commander, you need to see this." Emma's voice came through his communicator. He found her in the linguistics lab, surrounded by holographic screens showing alien text and symbols. She looked excited, more alive than she'd been since waking up. "I've been analyzing their historical databases," Emma said, pulling up a translated document. "They mention humans. Just once, in a section about extinct species." Jake leaned forward, reading the words. According to the Galactic Council's official history, humanity had been a promising young species that appeared approximately 12,000 years ago. They had expanded rapidly, colonized dozens of worlds, and then mysteriously vanished around 10,000 years ago. The Council believed humans had destroyed themselves in some kind of civil war. "They think we're dead," Jake whispered. "There's more," Emma continued. "Some of the older species, they tell stories about humans. Warnings. They say we were dangerous, unpredictable, that we fought like nothing else in the galaxy. Some of their words translate to demons, or ghosts that walk like men." Admiral Brooks had been listening from the doorway. "They were afraid of us. Terrified," Emma confirmed. "There are at least a dozen different species that fought against human expansion. They all lost. Badly. Then we just disappeared. And they convinced themselves we were gone forever." Jake looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, Earth was still spinning, hidden behind whatever defenses their ancestors had left behind. Somewhere out there, maybe other humans had survived too, scattered and forgotten across the galaxy. "What do we do, Commander?" Lisa asked. She had joined them, along with most of the senior staff. They all looked to him for guidance, for a plan. Jake thought about the options. They could hide, try to find Earth, without alerting anyone to their presence. They could make contact with one of the alien species, announce humanity's return to the galaxy. They could search for other human survivors first, build up their strength before revealing themselves. "We need information," he said finally. "Real information, not just what we can pick up from their broadcasts. We need to know what happened to Earth, to our colonies, to our people." "That means going into their space," Admiral Brooks said. "Making contact, one way or another." "Not yet," Jake replied. "First, we search. There are old human outposts on the charts, colonies we established before the long sleep. If any of them survived, if there are any records left, that's where they'll be." The crew agreed. Over the next week, they plotted a course to the nearest former human colony, a world called Haven's Rest in the charts from old Earth. It was 3 weeks away at the horizon's edge's maximum speed, and they would have to pass through territory claimed by a species called the Vryn. Emma had been studying the Vryn intensely. They were traders, peaceful and curious, with no military to speak of. If humanity was going to encounter any aliens, they would be the safest option. "But we don't make contact unless we have to," Jake ordered. "We're ghosts. We observe, we learn, and we stay hidden until we understand what we're dealing with." The ship moved through space silently, its stealth systems engaged. Human technology might have been old, but it had been built by people who understood war. The Vryn sensors never detected them as they passed through 3 different star systems. Haven's Rest appeared on their screens after 20 days of travel. The planet was beautiful from orbit, covered in blue oceans and green continents. But there were no cities, no lights on the night side, no satellites in orbit. If humans had ever lived there, they were long gone. Jake led the landing party himself, taking Emma and a security team down to the surface. They found ruins almost immediately. Half-buried structures that had once been a thriving colony. The architecture was unmistakably human, but nature had reclaimed most of it. "Over here," one of the security officers called out. He was standing near what looked like a bunker entrance, still partially intact. Inside, they found what they were looking for. Data cores, protected by layers of shielding, had survived the millennia. Emma worked to access them, while Jake explored deeper into the facility. He found living quarters, empty now, and a command center with screens still showing the last messages received. The data cores told a story of fear and desperation. Haven's Rest had been attacked by an unknown enemy, something the colonists called the Swarm. They had fought for months, but in the end, they had been overwhelmed. The last message was from the colony commander, ordering all survivors to evacuate on the emergency ships and make for Earth. They went home, Lisa said softly. She had accessed another data core, finding similar messages from 3 other colonies. They all went back to Earth when things got bad. And then Earth vanished, Emma added. Someone activated a cloaking system, hid the entire solar system from the galaxy. Jake felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. Humanity hadn't died out in war with each other. They had been fighting something else, something that drove them back to their homeworld. And then they had hidden, pulled a blanket of invisibility over Earth, and waited. Waited for what? Admiral Brooks asked. For us, Jake replied. For the colony ships to come back. For humanity to have another chance. As they flew back to the horizon's edge, Jake made his decision. They would continue searching, find more answers, locate other survivors if they existed, but eventually, they would have to make their presence known. The galaxy thought humanity was dead, a footnote in their history books. It was time to remind them that humans were very much alive, and when the galaxy learned that truth, everything would change. The crew gathered in the main assembly hall that night. Jake stood before them, hundreds of faces looking up at him with hope and fear in equal measure. They needed to hear from their commander. Needed to know what came next. We've been asleep for 10,000 years, Jake began. Everyone we knew is gone. Earth is hidden. The galaxy has moved on without us. But we're still here. We survived. And now, we have a choice to make. He paused, letting his words sink in. We can hide. Stay ghosts. Live out our lives on this ship. And never let anyone know we exist. Or we can reclaim our place in this galaxy. Show them that humanity isn't dead, isn't defeated, isn't forgotten. We can find our home, find our people, and make sure that our species has a future. The crew erupted in cheers. They were scared, yes, but they were also human. And humans didn't give up. They didn't hide. They fought. They survived. They thrived. Jake looked out at them and felt something stir in his chest. Pride, maybe, or determination. Whatever happened next, humanity was back. And the galaxy would have to deal with that reality, whether they were ready or not. The scout ship moved through the asteroid field like a whisper, its engines barely registering on any sensor that might be watching. Ben Carter sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls despite the tension coiling in his gut. This was their 5th mission into former human territory, and each one had revealed more questions than answers. Contact ahead, Sophie Mitchell said from the navigation station. She was young, barely 30, but she flew better than anyone Ben had ever seen. Looks like another settlement. Same construction patterns as the others. In the back of the scout ship, Aaron Hughes was already preparing his equipment. He was a xenoarchaeologist, trained to study alien ruins. But now he found himself examining the remains of his own species. The irony wasn't lost on him. Take us in slow, Ben ordered. Standard scan first. The settlement was on a moon orbiting a gas giant. From space, it looked intact, better preserved than Haven's Rest had been. Dome structures dotted the surface, connected by enclosed walkways. But like all the others, there were no life signs, no power signatures, no indication that anyone had lived there for thousands of years. They landed near the largest dome. Peter Walsh, the team's engineer, was the first out, his scanner sweeping the area for threats. He was cautious by nature, which had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments back when Earth still existed as they knew it. Air's breathable, Peter reported. Radiation levels normal. No toxins. Whatever happened here, it wasn't an environmental catastrophe. Inside the dome, they found a city frozen in time. Shops lined the streets, their windows still intact. Vehicles sat parked along the roads, waiting for drivers who would never return. It was eerie, walking through a place that looked like people had just stepped away for a moment. Aaron moved from building to building, his scanner recording everything. He found homes with tables still set for meals, schools with lessons still written on the boards, a hospital with beds made and ready for patients. But no bodies. No signs of violence. No indication of what had driven everyone away. This doesn't make sense, Aaron muttered, examining a children's playground. The swings moved slightly in the recycled air, creating a soft, creaking sound that echoed through the empty streets. They didn't evacuate in a panic. They left in an orderly fashion, took time to shut things down properly. Sophie was exploring the administrative center, a large building in the heart of the dome. She called out over the communicator, her voice tight with excitement. "I found something. Data archive. Still functional." The team gathered around as Sophie accessed the records. The archive contained years of logs, reports, and personal messages from the colonists. Aaron began sorting through them, looking for the final entries, the ones that would tell them what happened. What he found made his blood run cold. The colony had received a message from Earth. Not a distress call. Not a warning. An order. All human colonies were to evacuate immediately and return to the solar system. No explanation was given. No time frame for return. Just the command to come home. Issued by something called the Preservation Protocol. They all went back, Ben said quietly. Every colony. Every outpost. Everyone just packed up and went home. But why? Peter asked. What were they preserving? What were they running from? The archive held more answers. Aaron pulled up military reports, classified documents that should have been encrypted but had been left open, as if someone wanted future humans to find them. The reports spoke of contact with hostile species, battles fought across a dozen systems, losses that mounted with each passing year. Humanity had been winning those battles. The reports made that clear. Human tactics, human weapons, human determination had pushed back every enemy they faced. But the cost was high, and the enemies kept coming. Someone in Earth's government had made a decision. Rather than fight an endless war against a galaxy that feared them, humanity would hide. They would pull everyone back, cloak Earth, and wait. Wait for what? The reports didn't say. But Aaron suspected he knew. They were waiting for the galaxy to change, to evolve, to become something that might accept humanity without trying to destroy them out of fear. Over the next 3 weeks, the scout team visited 8 more abandoned colonies. They all told the same story. Orderly evacuation, data left behind, everyone heading back to Earth. But they found something else too. Something that changed everything. On a frozen world at the edge of former human space, they detected a faint signal. It was human in origin, but it was active, current, broadcasting on old colonial frequencies. Someone was out there, alive, calling for help. Ben reported back to the horizon's edge immediately. Jake Morrison listened to the recording, his face growing darker with each passing second. "It's a distress call," Emma confirmed, her translation software parsing the Old Earth dialect. "They're asking for rescue. They've been waiting for someone to come back." "How long has this been broadcasting?" Jake asked. "According to the signal degradation, maybe 200 years, Emma replied. "Someone's been maintaining it, keeping it active." Admiral Brooks stepped forward. "It could be a trap. The aliens might have found it and are using it to lure us out. Or it could be real," Lisa countered. "Real humans who survived out there. We have to investigate." Jake made the call. The horizon's edge changed course, heading toward the signal's source. It took them 4 days to reach it. 4 days of tension and speculation. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. The settlement was small, barely 50 buildings clustered around a central square. but there were lights in the windows. Smoke rising from chimneys, fields planted with crops, and people, real living people, working in those fields. The landing party approached carefully. Ben led the way, with Jake and Emma close behind. The people in the fields stopped working, staring at the newcomers with wide eyes. They were human, unmistakably so, but they looked different. Their clothes were primitive, handmade. Their tools were basic, metal and wood, rather than advanced alloys. An older man stepped forward. He was maybe 60, with gray hair and weathered skin. He looked at Jake's uniform, at the weapons the landing party carried, and tears began streaming down his face. "You came back," he whispered. "After all this time, you came back." His name was Daniel Cooper, and he was the leader of this small community. He took them to the settlement's meeting hall, where more people gathered to see the newcomers. There were maybe 300 of them total. 3 generations, living in this isolated place. Daniel told them the story. His ancestors had been part of a research station, studying the planet's unique ecosystem when the evacuation order came, but their ship had malfunctioned during the journey back to Earth. They had crashed on this world, too far from any help, with no way to repair their vessel or call for rescue. "We kept the beacon running," Daniel explained. "Every generation, we maintained it, hoping someone would hear. But as the years passed, we lost things. Technology failed. Knowledge was forgotten. We had to adapt, learn to live without the machines our ancestors relied on." Emma looked around at the settlement. These people had been isolated for thousands of years, cut off from both Earth and the broader galaxy. They had survived through determination and adaptation, but they had paid a price. They no longer knew how to read. They had no computers, no advanced medicine, no understanding of the technology that had brought their ancestors to this world. "What happened to Earth?" Daniel asked. "Why did no one come for us?" Jake explained what they knew. The long sleep, the awakening to find humanity vanished. Earth hidden somewhere in the galaxy. Daniel listened with growing horror, realizing that his people's isolation had been part of something much larger. "We thought we were the only ones left," Daniel said quietly. "We thought everyone else had made it home, and we were just forgotten." "You weren't forgotten," Jake replied. "Just lost. But we found you, and we're going to make sure you're not alone anymore." The people of the settlement gathered that evening, listening as Jake and his crew shared stories of Earth, of humanity's history, of the journey that had brought them across the stars. The children listened with wide eyes, hearing for the first time about the homeworld their ancestors had come from. But there were harder conversations too. Lisa spoke with Daniel privately, explaining that these people couldn't stay here, isolated and primitive. They needed medical care, education, reintegration with the rest of humanity. Daniel understood, but he was also afraid. His people had been independent for so long. How would they adapt to rejoining a civilization that was thousands of years more advanced? "We'll help you," Lisa promised. "We have teachers, doctors, equipment. You won't be alone in this." Over the next week, the crew of the Horizon's Edge worked to help the settlement. They provided medical care, treating diseases and conditions that should have been eliminated millennia ago. They shared food, tools, and basic technology. But something else happened during that week. The people of the settlement shared their own knowledge. They had lived on this world for generations, learning its rhythms and secrets. They had stories too, passed down through the years, stories about the old days when humanity reached for the stars. One story in particular caught Jake's attention. It was about the defense satellites that had been placed around Earth. Massive weapons platforms, designed to protect the homeworld from any threat. According to the story, those satellites were still active, still waiting, programmed to respond to one specific signal. "What signal?" Jake asked Daniel. "The return call," Daniel replied. When the colony ships came back, they were supposed to broadcast a specific code. The satellites would recognize it and allow them through. But if anyone else tried to approach Earth, the satellites would destroy them. Emma worked with the settlement's oldest members, reconstructing the code from fragments of memory and oral tradition. It took days, but eventually, she believed she had it. A sequence of numbers and tones that would identify them as human, as children of Earth coming home. If this is wrong, we might trigger an automatic defense response, Emma warned. Those satellites were designed to destroy fleets. But if it's right, we can go home, Jake replied. We can find Earth. Admiral Brooks was skeptical. We're not ready for that. We're one ship with a few thousand people. What if Earth is gone? What if there's nothing left? Then we'll know, Jake said. But I don't think it's gone. I think it's still there. Hidden. Waiting for us to come back. The decision was made. They would take the people from the settlement, continue their search for more survivors, and gather as much information as possible. And then, when they were ready, they would use the code and try to find Earth. As the Horizon's Edge prepared to leave, Daniel stood at the edge of the settlement, looking up at the ship. His people were already aboard, preparing for the journey. He turned to Jake one last time. Will we really find it? He asked. Will we really go home? Yes, Jake replied. I promise you that. The ship lifted off, leaving the settlement behind. As they climbed through the atmosphere, Ben Carter looked back at the small community they had found. 300 people who had survived against impossible odds, keeping humanity alive in the darkness. How many more are out there? Ben wondered aloud. How many other groups survived? Scattered across the galaxy. That's what we're going to find out, Jake said. Every human we find brings us closer to understanding what happened. And every human we save is another chance for our species. The Horizon's Edge turned toward the next set of coordinates, toward another abandoned colony. The search would continue. The answers would come. And eventually, they would find their way home. Nicole Green had never imagined she would be an ambassador. She had been a trade negotiator back on Earth, good at reading people and finding common ground in difficult situations. But that was before the long sleep, before waking up to find humanity erased from history. Now, she stood in the conference room of the Horizon's Edge, preparing for the most important meeting in human history. Are you sure about this? Jake Morrison asked for the 10th time. He stood by the viewport, watching a Vryn trade vessel drift past in the distance. They had been observing the aliens for weeks now, learning their patterns, their language, their culture. No, Nicole admitted. But hiding forever isn't an option. We need allies. We need information. And the Vryn seem like our best chance. The Vryn were peaceful traders who moved between star systems, exchanging goods and knowledge. They had no military, no history of aggression, and a reputation across the galaxy for being curious and welcoming. If humanity was going to reveal itself to anyone, the Vryn were the logical choice. Helen Price sat at the conference table, reviewing psychological profiles. She was a doctor who specialized in understanding different cultures and mindsets. She had spent the last month studying every piece of Vryn communication they could intercept. They value honesty above all else, Helen explained. Deception is considered the worst possible offense in their culture. When we make contact, we need to be truthful about who we are and what we want. Even if the truth scares them? Chris Palmer asked. He was a senator, one of the political leaders among the awakened humans. He had been elected to represent the civilian population in all major decisions. Especially if it scares them, Helen replied. They need to know we're not hiding anything. That, we can be trusted. The plan was simple. They would approach a lone Vryn trade ship, make peaceful contact, and explain their situation. If the Vryn reacted well, they would ask to be introduced to the Galactic Council. If things went badly, they would retreat and try a different approach. Jake assigned Commander Morrison to lead the contact mission, along with Nicole, Emma Davis for translation, and a small security team. They took a shuttle, unarmed and broadcasting friendship signals on all frequencies. The Vryn ship detected them almost immediately. It was a massive vessel, more cargo hold than anything else, covered in symbols and markings from a dozen different cultures. The Vryn captain responded to their hail within minutes. The face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything they had imagined. The Vryn were insectoid, with multiple eyes and delicate antennae that moved constantly. The captain's translator rendered its voice as soft and musical. "Greetings, unknown vessel. This is Captain Zix of the trade ship Wandering Prophet. Your design is unfamiliar to us. What species do you represent?" Nicole took a deep breath. "Captain Zix, my name is Nicole Green. We represent humanity, a species that the galaxy believes to be extinct. We've been in cryogenic sleep for 10,000 years, and we're only now returning to known space." There was a long silence. The Vryn captain's antennae went completely still, a sign that Helen had said indicated extreme shock or confusion. "Humanity?" Captain Zix said slowly. "But that's impossible. Humans are extinct. Everyone knows this. We're very much alive," Nicole replied. Another long pause. Then, tentatively, "Yes. Yes. You may. This is extraordinary. Simply extraordinary." The interior of the Vryn ship was beautiful. The cargo holds were filled with goods from across the galaxy, each item carefully catalogued and displayed. Captain Zix met them in a common area, along with several other crew members. All of them stared at the humans with their multifaceted eyes, antennae quivering with curiosity. "I've heard stories about humans," Captain Zix said, offering them cushions to sit on. "Old stories. From before I was spawned. My hatch mother used to tell them as warnings. She said humans were warriors, unstoppable and fierce, but also that they were traders, inventors, artists. She said the galaxy was lesser without them." Nicole felt a strange mix of emotions at those words. Pride that humanity was remembered with some fondness, but also concern about the warrior reputation. Over the next several hours, she explained everything. The colony ships, the long sleep gone wrong, waking up to find Earth hidden and humanity scattered. Captain Zix listened intently, occasionally asking questions through Emma's translation. "So you're searching for your homeworld," Captain Zix said finally. "And for other survivors. This is an incredible tale." "It's the truth," Nicole replied. "We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to find our place in the galaxy again." Captain Zix's antennae moved in what Helen said was equivalent to a nod. "I believe you. The question is, what will the Council say when they learn humans have returned?" "That's why we came to you first," Nicole explained. "We need guidance. We don't understand the current political situation. We don't know who our ancestors fought with, who they were allied with, or how the galaxy will react to our return." Captain Zix was quiet for a long moment. Then it made a decision. "I will help you. But you must understand, this news will shake the galaxy. Many species still remember the human wars. They remember how humanity fought, how they refused to surrender, how they turned the tide of every battle they entered. Some will welcome your return. Others will fear it." The news spread faster than any of them had anticipated. Within 2 days, every major species in the galaxy knew that humans had returned. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Communications channels buzzed with speculation, fear, and excitement. Jake received a message from the Council directly. They wanted to meet with human representatives. They wanted answers. They wanted assurances that humanity wasn't planning to resume the conflicts of 10,000 years ago. The council chamber was immense, a circular structure that could hold representatives from 300 different species. Nicole stood in the center with Chris Palmer and Admiral Brooks, facing rows of alien faces. Some looked curious. Others looked hostile. Many just looked afraid. The council speaker was a tall, crystalline being called a Thrent. Its voice echoed through the chamber without need for translation. Humanity. We believed you extinct. We mourned your loss and recorded your history with respect. Now you return. And we must ask, what are your intentions? Chris Palmer stepped forward. He was a politician, trained for moments like this. Honorable Council, we seek only peace and cooperation. We've been asleep for 10,000 years. The conflicts our ancestors fought are ancient history to us. We want to join the galactic community, to share our knowledge, and learn from yours. A voice called out from the audience, belonging to a reptilian species called the Korthan. Your ancestors fought against 3 of our member species. You defeated them utterly. You conquered their worlds and drove them to the edge of extinction before you vanished. How can we trust that you won't do the same again? Admiral Brooks responded to that one. Because we understand now what our ancestors didn't. This galaxy is too vast for any one species to conquer. Too diverse for any one culture to dominate. We don't want war. We want to survive. Same as everyone else. But the questions kept coming. How many humans had survived? Where was Earth? What weapons did they possess? Were there more colony ships out there, waiting to wake up? Nicole tried to answer truthfully, while also protecting their vulnerabilities. Yes. There were probably more humans scattered across the galaxy. No. They didn't know exactly where Earth was. Their weapons were old but functional. They had one ship, a few thousand people, and a desperate hope for a peaceful future. The debate went on for hours. Some species argued for immediate integration, welcoming humanity back with open arms. Others demanded quarantine, wanted humans restricted to specific systems until they proved they could be trusted. A few suggested preemptive action, striking before humanity could regain its strength. That suggestion sent chills through Nicole. She looked around the chamber and saw the fear in many faces. They weren't afraid of what humanity had done. They were afraid of what humanity could do. And that fear could turn violent very quickly. A species called the Drayan, who had fought against humans in the ancient past, spoke with barely controlled anger. We remember the human wars. We remember how your people fought. You didn't just defeat us in battle, you broke us. You took our colonies, our resources, our pride. It took us 5,000 years to rebuild. And now, you want us to welcome you back? Chris tried to respond, but the Drayan representative continued. We vote for quarantine. Keep the humans isolated until we can be certain they won't threaten us again. The vote was called. Species after species cast their decision. The chamber filled with light as votes were tallied. Nicole watched the count with growing dread. The result was split almost evenly. Half the council voted for integration. The other half voted for quarantine. It would take a 2/3 majority to pass any resolution. The council speaker announced that the matter would be tabled for further discussion. In the meantime, humanity would be granted provisional status. They could travel in galactic space. But they were not full members of the council. They had no vote, no representation, no legal protection under council law. As they left the chamber, Nicole felt the weight of what had just happened. They had revealed themselves, but they hadn't won acceptance. They were in limbo, neither welcomed nor expelled. Back on the horizon's edge, Jake called a meeting of all senior staff. The mood was tense as everyone processed what had happened. We're exposed now, Admiral Brooks said grimly. Every species in the galaxy knows we're here. If someone wants to attack us, they know where to find us. But we also have potential allies, Lisa countered. Captain Zix and the Vryn support us. There are other species who voted for integration. We're not alone in this. Emma had been monitoring galactic communications since the council session. The chatter is intense. Some species are celebrating our return. Others are calling for our destruction. There's a lot of fear out there. Helen spoke up, her voice thoughtful. Fear is understandable. We're an unknown variable in their stable system. They've built a galaxy based on peace and cooperation. Humanity represents change, unpredictability. We need to show them we can fit into their world. But over the next few weeks, it became clear that some species had no intention of giving humanity that chance. Reports came in of military buildups near human space. Ships were moving into position, ostensibly for defense, but the pattern was obvious to anyone with military training. "They're preparing for war," Admiral Brooks said, pointing to the tactical display. "Multiple species, coordinating their movements. This isn't random." Jake studied the display, his face grim. "How long before they're ready to strike?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. The crew worked frantically to prepare. They upgraded their weapons systems, reinforced their shields, and drilled combat scenarios. But they all knew the truth. One ship, even a human warship, couldn't stand against the combined might of multiple alien fleets, unless those fleets weren't expecting what humanity could do. Nicole sent messages to every species that had voted for integration. She reached out to Captain Zix and the Vryn. She called on the few allies humanity had managed to make in their short time back in the galaxy. Some responded with support. Others remained silent, unwilling to take sides against their fellow council members. Chris Palmer made broadcasts to the galaxy, pleading for peace, explaining that humanity wanted no conflict. But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Fear had taken root, and it was growing faster than reason could counteract it. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Jake Morrison stood before his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their faces. But they were also ready. They were human. And humans didn't surrender. "If they come for us," Jake said quietly, "we'll show them why their ancestors feared us. We'll remind them what humanity is capable of. And maybe, just maybe, we'll survive long enough to find our way home." In the council chambers, debates raged on. But in the darkness of space, ships were moving. An attack was coming. The galaxy was about to remember what it meant when humanity went to war. The attack came without warning at 0347 ship time. Ryan Foster was on watch when the sensors screamed, detecting multiple vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel right on top of their position. He hit the alert button and grabbed the communication system. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Incoming hostile vessels." Ryan commanded the Defiant Dawn, one of 3 warships that had separated from the main Horizon's Edge fleet. They had been expecting an attack. But not this soon, and not this coordinated. Through the viewport, he could see them now. 20 ships, maybe more, bearing the markings of at least 5 different species. Admiral Kyle Brooks was on the bridge within seconds, still fastening his uniform. He took in the tactical display with one glance and started issuing orders. "All ships, formation Delta. Weapons hot, shields to maximum. Someone get me visual confirmation on those ships." Maya Collins was already working on it. She was the best tactical officer in the human fleet, able to process battle information faster than anyone else. Her fingers flew across her console, pulling up data on each enemy vessel. "Confirmed hostile intent," Maya reported. "They're charging weapons. Looks like Drayan heavy cruisers supported by Korthan destroyers and 3 other species. Total count is 23 ships. 7. And we have 3, Ryan muttered. The odds were terrible. But human ships had faced worse during the old wars. The communication system crackled. A Drayan face appeared on screen, its scales dark and eyes cold. "Human vessels. You are ordered to surrender immediately and submit to council authority. You will be escorted to a quarantine zone where you will remain until the council decides your fate." Admiral Brooks studied the Drayan commander for a long moment. "And if we refuse, then you will be destroyed. You have 5 minutes to comply." The channel closed. Brooks turned to his command staff, his face showing no emotion. "They want us to go quietly, to disappear into whatever prison they've prepared. That's not going to happen." greased. Sir, they outnumber us 8-1, Ryan pointed out. Our ships are old. We don't know how their weapons compare to ours. Then we're about to find out, Brooks replied. All ships, prepare for combat. Target priority is the heavy cruisers. If we can take them out fast, the smaller ships might break and run. Greg Turner's voice came through from engineering. He was the chief engineer on the Defiant Dawn, responsible for keeping their ancient weapons and shields operational. Admiral, I can give you full power for maybe 20 minutes. After that, we'll need to cycle the reactors or risk a meltdown. 20 minutes will have to be enough, Brooks said. All ships, execute attack pattern Alpha on my mark. The 5 minutes passed in tense silence. The enemy fleet moved into position, forming a standard council battle formation. They were clearly expecting the human ships to either surrender or try to run. They weren't expecting an attack. Mark, Brooks said calmly. The 3 human warships accelerated forward at impossible speeds. The aliens had gotten used to council regulations that limited ship velocities for safety reasons. Human vessels had no such limitations. They had been built for war, not safety. Ryan watched his screen as the distance closed in seconds. The Drayan commander barely had time to register surprise before the Defiant Dawn opened fire. Human railguns, using simple kinetic energy, punched through the alien shields like they weren't there. The first heavy cruiser exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Target destroyed, Maya reported. Moving to Target 2, the other human ships were having similar success. The enemy fleet scrambled to respond, but their formations were breaking apart. They had expected a defensive fight, not an aggressive assault. Human tactics from the old wars were completely outside their experience. Jake Morrison commanded the second human ship, the Freedom's Call. He watched as another Drayan cruiser tried to bring its weapons to bear. But human ships were faster, more maneuverable. The Freedom's Call rolled beneath the enemy's firing arc and unleashed a spread of missiles. The cruiser's shields flickered and died. The hull came apart in sections. 3 down, Jake reported over the fleet channel. Corthan destroyers moving to flank. Jake, I see them, Ryan replied. The Defiant Dawn spun on its axis, presenting its heavily armored bow to the incoming fire. Enemy beams splashed against the shields, draining power but not breaking through. Ryan counted down the seconds until his weapons recharged. The third human ship, the last stand under Captain Kevin Stone, was engaged with 4 enemy vessels at once. Kevin was a veteran of the old wars, one of the few who had actually seen combat before the long sleep. He piloted his ship with practiced precision, using asteroids and debris as cover, never staying still long enough for enemy targeting systems to lock on. This is last stand to fleet. Kevin's voice came through, strained. Taking heavy fire. Shields at 40%. Hold your position, Brooks ordered. We're coming to you. The 3 human ships moved to support each other, a maneuver they had drilled countless times. They formed a triangle, each ship covering the others, their combined firepower devastating anything that came close. The enemy fleet tried to surround them, but human ships moved too fast, struck too hard. Maya was calling out targets constantly. Corthan, destroyer. Bearing 270. Weapons charged. Fire. The Defiant Dawn's railguns spoke again. The Corthan ship tried to evade, but it was too slow. The kinetic rounds tore through its engines, leaving it dead in space. But the enemy was learning. They stopped trying to engage in close combat, and instead pulled back, using their longer-range beam weapons. The human ship's shields began to take real damage under the sustained fire. Shields at 60%, Greg reported from engineering. We can't take this kind of punishment forever. Ryan looked at the tactical display. They had destroyed 8 enemy ships, but 15 remained, and more were likely on the way. They needed to end this fight quickly, or retreat. All ships, focus fire on the command vessel, Brooks ordered. If we take out their leader, The rest might lose coordination. The 3 human ships concentrated their fire on the largest Drayan cruiser. It was a massive vessel, easily 3 times the size of any human ship. Its shields were powerful, absorbing hit after hit. But human weapons were designed for exactly this scenario. Overwhelming firepower focused on a single point. The shields flickered. Failed. The human ships poured fire into the exposed hull. Explosions blossomed across the cruiser's surface. Then, suddenly, the entire ship came apart in a massive detonation that lit up space for kilometers in every direction. The enemy fleet stopped firing. For a long moment, there was silence across all channels. Then, one by one, the remaining ships began to withdraw. They scattered in different directions, their formation completely broken. "They're running," Maya said with disbelief in her voice. "Let them go," Brooks ordered. "We've made our point." The 3 human ships regrouped, taking stock of their damage. The last stand had taken the worst of it, with shields down and hull breaches on 3 decks. But they were all still flying, all still capable of fighting if needed. "Damage report," Brooks requested. The reports came in from all 3 ships. Shields could be repaired. Hull breaches could be patched. Weapons systems needed recalibration, but were functional. They had survived, and they had won. But Ryan knew this was just the beginning. The enemy had sent 20 ships as a test, probably expecting them to surrender or be destroyed easily. Now they knew that humans could fight, that they still had the skills and weapons that made them dangerous 10,000 years ago. Across the galaxy, species watched the battle recordings in shock. The fight had been broadcast on multiple channels, either by the attacking forces or by neutral observers. Everyone saw how quickly human ships moved, how devastating their weapons were, how coordinated their tactics. In council chambers across hundreds of worlds, emergency sessions were called. Some species demanded a full military response, arguing that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Others called for immediate negotiations, recognizing that a war with humanity would be costly even if they won. Nicole Green found herself flooded with communication requests. Species that had voted for quarantine were now asking for dialogue. Species that had remained neutral wanted to know humanity's terms for peace. Even some of the attacking forces were sending messages, asking for prisoner exchanges and ceasefire agreements. "This is insane," Nicole said, looking at the list of incoming messages. "Yesterday they wanted to lock us away. Today they're afraid of us." Helen Price sat with her, helping to process the diplomatic flood. They just saw what humanity can do in battle. They're remembering why their ancestors feared us. Fear drives action faster than reason. But not all the news was good. Reports were coming in of more military buildups. Some species were calling for allies, forming coalitions against the human threat. The council was fracturing, divided between those who wanted peace and those who wanted security through humanity's elimination. And then, the messages started coming from unexpected sources. Other human signals, weak and scattered, broadcasting on old colonial frequencies. Ships were waking up across the galaxy, drawn by the news of humanity's return and the battle that followed. Lisa Grant coordinated the contacts, trying to determine how many humans had survived. Every day brought new discoveries. A colony ship here, a hidden settlement there, small groups that had endured in isolation for millennia. They were all waking up now, all reaching out, all looking for Earth. "We're not alone," Lisa reported to Jake. "There could be hundreds of thousands of us scattered across dozens of systems. Maybe more. The long sleep preserved our species better than we thought." Jake stood on the bridge of the Freedom's Call, looking at the star charts that showed human positions. They were spread across the galaxy, small points of light in the darkness. Together, they were still weak. But if they could unite, if they could gather their strength, humanity might have a real chance. Admiral Brooks sent a message to all awakening humans. To all human vessels and colonies receiving this transmission. The galaxy knows we have returned. They are afraid, and fear makes them dangerous. We must stand together. Send your coordinates. Send your numbers. We will find each other. We will protect each other. And we will find our way home. The responses came flooding in. Ships changed course, heading toward rendezvous points. Colonies prepared for evacuation or defense. Humanity was mobilizing, not for war, but for survival. On the horizon's edge, Chris Palmer addressed the growing human population. They now had 10,000 people awake and active, with more joining every day. We didn't want this fight, he said. We came in peace. But peace requires two willing parties. If they force us to fight, we will. If they give us a chance for dialogue, we'll take it. Either way, humanity survives. The council called for another emergency session. This time, they didn't summon human representatives. They debated among themselves, trying to decide their next move. The broadcast was public, and humans listened to every word. Some species argued for all-out war. Strike now, while they're still weak. Gather every ship, every weapon. Overwhelm them with numbers. Others counseled patience. We've seen what 3 human ships can do. Imagine what happens if there are hundreds, thousands. We need peace, not war. The debate raged for hours. Finally, a vote was called. Not for war or peace, but for a decision to capture and detain several high-ranking human officers to put them on trial for the deaths caused in the battle. The vote passed. The council issued arrest warrants for Admiral Brooks, Jake Morrison, and Ryan Foster. They were charged with murder, piracy, and crimes against the Galactic Order. When the warrants were transmitted to human ships, Brooks read them and laughed. They want to put us on trial for defending ourselves. That tells you everything you need to know about council justice. What do we do? Ryan asked. Brooks looked at the younger officer. We do what humans have always done. We survive. We adapt. And we make them understand that we're not going away. Across the galaxy, more human ships were powering up their weapons. More colonies were raising shields and preparing defenses. The council had tried to intimidate humanity into submission. Instead, they had reminded every human why their species had survived so long. The war hadn't started yet, but everyone knew it was coming. Julia Sanders never expected to become president of humanity. She had been a civil administrator on the colony ship, responsible for managing supply chains and resource distribution. But when the awakened human population reached 50,000 people, and they needed to elect a leader, her name kept coming up in every discussion. You're organized, you're fair, and you don't have any military background, Chris Palmer had told her. The galaxy needs to see that humans are more than just warriors. They need to see that we can govern ourselves peacefully. So she had run, and she had won. Now she stood in what they were calling the Assembly Hall, a converted cargo bay on the horizon's edge, preparing to address not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. The speech would be broadcast on every channel, translated into every language. This was humanity's chance to speak with one voice. Ready, Madam President? Emma Davis asked. She had become humanity's chief communications officer, managing the flood of messages between humans and aliens. As ready as I'll ever be, Julia replied. The broadcast began. Julia looked into the camera, knowing that billions of beings across hundreds of worlds would see this message. She kept her voice steady and clear. My name is Julia Sanders, and I speak for humanity. 3 months ago, we woke from a sleep that was supposed to last 2 centuries, but lasted 10,000 years. We returned to a galaxy that had forgotten us, that believed we were extinct. We came in peace, seeking only to understand what had happened to our species, and to find our place among the stars. Once more, she paused, letting the words settle. We were met with suspicion and fear. We understand why. Our ancestors fought wars that the galaxy still remembers. But those wars were not of our making. We defended ourselves against those who saw us as threats, simply because we were different. And when the cost became too high, we chose to hide, rather than continue fighting. Behind her, a display showed images of abandoned human colonies, of the small settlement they had found, of the horizon's edge floating in space. For 10,000 years, small groups of humans survived in isolation. They kept our species alive when everything else was lost. They waited, hoping that someday their descendants would find Earth again. Julia's voice grew stronger. That day is coming. We have found the way home. We have discovered the codes and locations that our ancestors left behind. But we will not go home alone. We will not hide again. We are offering the Galactic Council a choice. She held up a data chip. This contains a proposal, a new structure for the Council, one that protects all species from tyranny and fear, one that includes humans but gives voice to every civilization, large or small. One that makes war a last resort rather than a political tool. The proposal had taken weeks to write, with input from humans and sympathetic aliens alike. It included term limits for council members, democratic voting processes, and strict rules about military action. Most importantly, it created a system of checks and balances that prevented any one species or coalition from dominating the others. We call this the Accord of Species, Julia continued. It guarantees mutual defense, free trade, and cultural exchange. It protects smaller civilizations from larger ones. It requires unanimous consent for any military action, and it establishes a neutral court for resolving disputes. She looked directly into the camera. We're not asking the Council to trust us because of who our ancestors were. We're asking you to judge us by our actions. We've been attacked, but we've shown restraint. We've been threatened, but we've offered peace. We've been feared, but we've chosen to be hopeful. The speech continued for 20 minutes, laying out humanity's vision for a better galaxy. When it ended, Julia felt drained, but also relieved. The message was out there. Now they would see how the galaxy responded. The responses came quickly. Some were positive, praising humanity's vision and wisdom. Others were skeptical, questioning whether humans could be trusted to follow their own rules. A few were hostile, calling the Accord a trick to gain power. But something unexpected happened. Species that had been neutral started speaking up in favor of the Accord. Smaller civilizations that had felt powerless in the Council saw an opportunity for real representation. Even some of humanity's old enemies admitted that the current Council structure had problems that needed fixing. Admiral Kyle Brooks watched the political situation evolve from the bridge of his command ship. He had spent the last month organizing the growing human fleet, coordinating with the dozens of awakened vessels that now formed a proper military force. They numbered 30 ships now, old but deadly, crewed by people who remembered how to fight. The politicians are doing their job, Brooks said to Nicole Green, who had joined him for a strategy session. Now we need to make sure we're ready in case their job fails. You think the Council will reject the Accord? Nicole asked. Some of them will. The question is whether enough will accept it to make a difference. Brooks pulled up a tactical map, showing the current positions of various fleets. We've detected military buildups from 6 major species. They're not backing down. Nicole studied the map. How long before they're ready to attack again? 2 weeks, maybe less. They're being more careful this time, coordinating better. When they come, it won't be a test. It'll be an all-out assault. But humanity wasn't idle either. Lisa Grant had been working with teams of scientists and engineers, studying the old defense systems that had protected Earth. They had found the locations of dozens of automated defense satellites, weapons platforms that had been dormant for millennia. If they could reactivate them, humanity would have a defensive network that could stand against any fleet. The problem is range, Lisa explained to Julia in a private briefing. The satellites can protect Earth and the immediate area around it. But our people are scattered across dozens of systems. We can't defend everyone at once. Then we need to bring them together, Julia said. Everyone who can travel needs to head toward Earth. Everyone who can't needs to find defensible positions and prepare to hold out. The Great Migration began. Human ships from across the galaxy turned toward home, following the coordinates that had been reconstructed from ancient records. Colony settlements were evacuated, their populations loaded onto any vessel that could fly. It was a massive undertaking, coordinating hundreds of groups spread across light years of space. Jake Morrison led one of the escort fleets, protecting a convoy of civilian ships as they made the long journey toward Earth. They encountered several alien patrols along the way, but most kept their distance. The galaxy had seen what human warships could do. Few wanted to test that knowledge again. "We're 3 days from Earth's coordinates," Jake reported during a fleet-wide conference call. Emma Davis had been working on the recognition codes, refining them based on information from multiple sources. She was as confident as she could be that the codes would work. But there was only one way to be sure. As the human fleet approached the coordinates where Earth should be, they encountered what appeared to be empty space. No planet, no sun, nothing but darkness. But their sensors detected something strange: gravitational anomalies, energy signatures that didn't match anything natural. "It's a cloaking field," Lisa said, with awe in her voice. "The entire solar system is hidden behind a massive cloaking field. Our ancestors really did it." Emma transmitted the recognition codes, a complex sequence of signals that identified them as human vessels returning home. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the space before them began to shimmer and part, like a curtain being drawn aside. Earth appeared. Beautiful, blue and green, exactly as they remembered it from old recordings. The sun shone bright, warming a world that had been hidden for 10,000 years. And surrounding the planet were the defense satellites. Massive platforms bristling with weapons, now powering down as they recognized friendly signals. Jake felt tears running down his face. They were home. After everything, after all the years and struggles and battles, they were finally home. The fleet moved into orbit, joining the dozens of other human vessels that had already arrived. The planet's surface showed signs of life. Cities, though smaller than the ancient metropolises humanity had once built. Agriculture, infrastructure. Someone had survived down there, maintaining Earth, while the rest of humanity slept among the stars. Contact with the surface was established quickly. The people of Earth had known about the defense satellites, had maintained them for generations. They had been waiting for this day, when their lost children would return from the stars. "Welcome home," came a voice from the surface. It belonged to an old woman named Grace Palmer, the leader of Earth's surviving population. Over the next week, the full picture emerged. Earth's population was small, maybe 5 million people, descendants of those who had made it back during the evacuation. They had lived simply, focusing on sustainability rather than expansion. They had kept the old knowledge alive, teaching each generation about the stars and the humans who lived among them. "We knew you'd come back," Grace told Julia during their first face-to-face meeting. "Our ancestors left instructions. Keep the satellites running. Maintain the cloaking field. Wait for the return signal. And when it comes, open the doors and welcome everyone home." With humanity reunited on and around Earth, the population swelled to over 200,000 people. Ships filled the orbital space. The surface began preparing to receive more colonists. Earth was becoming a true homeworld again, but the galaxy hadn't forgotten about them. The Galactic Council met to discuss the Accord of Species. The debates were intense, with species divided sharply between those who supported humanity's proposal and those who saw it as a threat to the existing order. Admiral Brooks received intelligence that several species were still planning military action regardless of the Council's decision. They wanted to strike at Earth while humanity was gathering there. "Eliminate the threat once and for all." "Let them come," Brooks said grimly. We're defending our homeworld now. We have the satellites, the orbital platforms, and 300 years of tactical knowledge. Any fleet that attacks Earth will regret it. But Julia had a different idea. She reached out directly to the leaders of the species planning the attack. She offered them something unprecedented: a tour of Earth's defenses. She wanted them to see exactly what they would be facing. Show them our strength, Julia explained to her advisors. Not to threaten them, but to make them understand that attacking us is futile. Let them see that we're prepared to defend ourselves, and then offer them peace one more time. The invitation was accepted, though nervously. A delegation of 6 species, including several who had fought in the recent battles, arrived at Earth under flag of truce. They were shown the defense satellites, the orbital weapons platforms, the coordinated fleet movements. They were shown human determination and human preparedness. One of the delegates, a Corthan military commander, spoke quietly to Nicole after the tour. Your ancestors weren't exaggerating. You're ready for war in a way we haven't been for thousands of years. We don't want war, Nicole replied. But we'll fight if we have to. The question is, do you want to find out what happens when you push humans to that point? Enna. 3. We don't want to find out what happens when you push humans to that point. The delegates returned to their governments with a clear message. Attacking Earth would be catastrophically expensive even if they won. The cost in ships and lives would be enormous, and there was no guarantee they would win at all. The council met again, and this time the vote was different. Species that had been pushing for military action withdrew their support. Others who had been neutral came out in favor of the accord. The tide was turning. The final vote came 3 weeks after Julia's speech. The Accord of Species was put before the full council. Each species cast their vote, and the galaxy watched the tally. It needed 2/3 support to pass. The count came down to the wire. Several major species abstained, unwilling to commit either way. But in the end, the accord passed by a narrow margin. The Galactic Council would be reformed, restructured according to humanity's proposal. Julia watched the vote from Earth, surrounded by her advisors and the leaders of Earth's population. When the final tally was announced, the room erupted in cheers. They had done it. Humanity had secured its place in the galaxy, not through war but through determination and hope. The new council structure was implemented over the next 6 months. Nicole Green became humanity's first official ambassador to the reformed council. Admiral Brooks took a seat on the Military Oversight Committee, ensuring that no species could abuse their power. Chris Palmer helped establish the neutral court system that would resolve disputes between civilizations. But perhaps the most important changes happened on Earth itself. The planet that had been hidden for 10,000 years was now open to the galaxy. Alien visitors came to see the human homeworld, to understand the species that had caused so much change. Cultural exchange programs began. Trade agreements were signed. Slowly, carefully, trust began to build. Lisa Grant led teams of scientists and historians in documenting everything they had learned. The long sleep, the abandoned colonies, the species who had survived in isolation. All of it was recorded for future generations, so humanity would never forget what they had overcome. 1 year after waking from the long sleep, Jake Morrison stood on the surface of Earth for the first time. He looked up at the sky and saw human ships moving overhead, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. The galaxy had learned that humanity was back, and humanity had learned that they could build a future worth fighting for. Emma Davis joined him, watching the same sky. Hard to believe it's only been a year. Feels like a lifetime. It has been, Jake replied. The old humanity died when we went into the pods. We're something new now. Something better, I think. Across the galaxy, other humans were having similar moments. On former colonies, now being resettled. On ships exploring beyond known space, with alien allies joining them. In council chambers, where human voices were heard and respected, humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. Julia Sanders stood in the new assembly hall on Earth, preparing to deliver her first annual address. The building was filled with humans and aliens alike, species that had once feared each other, now working together. 1 year ago, we woke to a galaxy that had forgotten us, Julia began. Today, we stand in a galaxy that knows us, respects us, and is beginning to trust us. This is not the end of our journey. It's just the beginning. Together, all species of this galaxy, we'll build something better than what came before. We'll explore further, reach higher, and achieve more than any single species could alone. She looked out at the assembled crowd, seeing hope in faces both human and alien. For 10,000 years, humanity slumbered. But we never died. We never gave up. And now, we're awake. The galaxy will never forget that again. The applause was deafening, crossing species barriers. In that moment, standing in the assembly hall of a reunited Earth, humanity knew they were truly home. The long sleep was over. The new dawn had begun.